Hey, I'm Ilya Kirnos, general partner, one of the founding partners at a venture capital firm called Signalfire. Before venture capital, I was a software engineer for many, many years. Spent a long time working at Google as a software engineer, worked on many things there, ads, infrastructure, Gmail monetization. And then after 9 years at Google, left, joined a startup that was acquired by Twitter and left before the acquisition, co-founded Signalfire in 2013, and I've been investing in startups, including cybersecurity startups, ever since.
Hi, I'm Caleb Sima. My title right now is I'm the chair of the Cloud Security Alliance's AI Security Initiative. And so that means basically I am helping build and create an AI community around practical ways to solve and secure AI for the security industry. It's a part-time job that I use for CSA as a nonprofit in the hopes that we can go and build AI safely as we move forward. My history is I've been in the security industry for a very long time. I'm definitely an old man in this industry. I started way back in the 90s as a pen tester and a reverse engineer. And then I became an entrepreneur. I started my first cybersecurity company in 2000. I started this company called Spy Dynamics. We've created a product called WebInspect. It was the world's first black box scanner. Then that grew quite successfully, was acquired by HP. I then became CTO of application security at HP for 3 years. I helped build the acquisitions for them in the security industry, including acquisitions of Fortify, ArcSight, all these others. I then became CEO of a company called Armorize, which was focused on static code analysis and then malware. And then it was acquired by Proofpoint. And then I took a small stint alongside like where Ilya went on VC road. And so I went to Andreessen Horowitz for a year, became an EIR, and then started my second company called Blue Box, which was focused on mobile application security. And then that was acquired by a company called Lookout. And then I made an interesting twist in my career. I decided I've been building a lot of weapons, but I've never been in the battlefield defending organizations. And so I said, I'm going to go try that for a while. And I became a defender in an organization. I went to Capital One to be a defender. And then I went to become head of security over at a company called Databricks, building their security team from scratch. And then I became chief security officer at Robinhood. And then most recently, obviously, I now am chair of CSA. Tell me about the current intersection of AI and security.
Yeah, it's all the hype right now. So let's see. We've been investing in AI for a long time and have gone through a couple of these cycles with sort of excitement around different generations of technology in the AI ML space. And this is the latest. And maybe I think it's kind of helpful to ground ourselves in kind of where we are right now and kind of where we've been. I think what has people very excited today are these large language models and maybe broadening it out. It's broadening out to beyond language, to images, video, audio, but these foundation models that are trained on lots and lots of data. But there is a specific application of a technology called deep learning, which has its roots going back all the way to the 1950s. That's when the theoretical underpinnings were formed. The technology didn't work for a long time. And in some ways, like neural networks, which was the original term, became a dirty word because they failed for so long and so hard. And then they started to work and show results in the early 2010s or so. And the first sort of wave of this was around image recognition. So if you remember, there was something called ImageNet, and there's competition around labeling images. So if you see a dog in an image, you can say that's a dog, or a cat, that's a cat. Kind of what you see in Google Photos today, when you can go and search for something. And that was the first really successful application of deep learning. And then there's been a wave of different applications of this technology to different fields. The most recent one has been language models. What are language models? It's basically sort of like fill in the next word, the cat in the hat or something else.
Yeah, I would also state, I think the big shift was we went from AI or machine learning, really, which was a passive technology where it was all about analyzing and making decisions out of that, to where LLMs have come in and being generative. It's the first really creating and outputting and creating content or things with it that became AI.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think the one thing that's taken people by surprise in this wave is what people call these emergent capabilities, basically things that weren't explicitly designed for or really anticipated by the creators of these algorithms, which is as you scale these things, as they get big and get more training data, all of a sudden, just this simple problem statement of complete the next word. What's the most likely next word? All of a sudden, you can have these things carry on a very human-like conversation in a chatbot or something like that.
Or scan networks and exploit them automatically.
Yeah, that's the intersection with cybersecurity.
The intersection part.
And I think that's, people like to talk about making AI secure and safe and all of that stuff, like prompt injection attacks, et cetera. I think the biggest intersection of AI and cybersecurity is going to be on the attack side, where, attackers don't really care if it works 100% of the time. For them, they're going to spray and pray, just like, hook up these algorithms to say, hey, let's ingest whatever documents we have on how to do cross-site scripting, and then connect to an API that lets us sort of instrument an attack against a website and execute it against like the web, the internet or whatever at scale. And I think that's what's going to be coming. And if today it's a little bit kind of like you have hacker versus defender, I think in the future it's going to be hacker algo versus defender algo. It's going to be machine versus machine.
And one other thing is I kind of look at this in patterns. Like when cloud first came out, right? Cloud was coming out. And what's really interesting is actually hackers were doing cloud services way before cloud services, because you could go pay for someone for running DDoSes. Yeah. They were out-servicing their hacking services, in the dark web. But now when cloud was coming out, AWS, all these things, you got this explosion of, obviously, now what you've done is you've said, hey, if you're running a data center and it takes you 30 engineers, now it only takes 2, and you can manage and scale at whatever level you want. So infrastructure and compute and storage just became accessible to everybody, right? And then all of a sudden now one person can use it for massive amounts of either attacking and or I'm building so much more things to attack, right? So scale grows, attack surface grows, complexity grows. And then the attackers now use that same scale to go then attack. I see AI very similar, except now it's one layer up, right? So like cloud is sort of the infrastructure, compute, and storage. Now all of a sudden AI allows at the application logic layer a little bit more of that same sort of expansion, which is, okay, what used to take me 30 application engineers to build this program, I can now take 5 of them alongside Copilot and aiding of AI to go create way more code, way more application interface. Again, way more complexity, way more scale the same way. And attackers can now use AI to similarly attack the application layer at a much more distributed at scale way, right? So like now, to give a simple example, is phishing is the real example people use, which is, okay, when you take spear phishing used to take a lot of work for an attacker. I had to go sort of recon the individual, what the company is. Oh, I noticed they just hired a new CFO. Like, okay, I'm going to go craft my message, do the thing, and then boom, I can now new CFO gets this message from the CEO saying, please wire this thing immediately. Oh, okay, I'm new here. I'm going to go and do that.
Yeah.
That took a lot of work for the attacker because it's at an application layer, it's at this logic layer. But now with AI, I can automatically do the recon. I can now, with the cloud compute, I can then say, monitor LinkedIn for this specific company, and anytime a new hire comes in, look at the person's background, look at where they are. AI will generate the automatic email. You can tell it this is who you are and what you're trying to convince this person to do, and then it will automatically spearfish, and the attacker doesn't do a thing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like what used to be sort of low-hanging fruit, or really high-hanging fruit, is now lower. Right? That cost and that capability is lower, and now attackers are all using this.
I think there's no doubt that, security is sort of like this sword and shield game, attack versus defense. I think the attackers, whenever something new comes about, always gain the initial advantage, and then defenders have to react.
Yeah, because attackers have no compliance, no regulation, no politics and process.
And frankly, defenders don't know what to defend against until the attackers do the thing. You know what I mean? In some ways, our industry really only exists as a reaction to attacks. So until you know what the attacks are, it's hard to know what to go defend against.
But I feel like, both for better, I feel this is a little bit of a, maybe what's the right word for this? Sword was two to the
sword and shield.
I would say two-bladed sword.
Double-edged,
which is, hey, AI and the attackers using AI is really bad for us. but it also, I think, it becomes a forcing function for then defense to have to understand prevention is the only way.
Yeah.
Like as an example, take cloud. Well, what did the attackers do with cloud? It allowed them to scan at such a large scale that simple things like firewall rules and open ports and open services, well, quote unquote, is largely not that big of a problem anymore because enterprises started plugging that up preventatively. I start creating private networks, VPNs, like zero trust, blah, blah, blah. Now, if attackers start attacking where spear phishing, deep fakes, ability for, like, for example, there was recently a thing around a worm being able to use an SSH and use a little AI around worm and understand how to worm through networks. All of a sudden, and because we're generating more code and more scale, you just can't react anymore. There's so much to cover, and the attacks are now coming at such a high level, you just can't react. So that means it should be this forcing function, hopefully, that enterprises are being like, you have to be preventative. Because just like putting a host on the internet today, you immediately get attacked. Now the level of sophistication of those attacks would be that immediate equivalently put an app out on the internet. You can't just put it out there blindly. You have to be preventative immediately.
Do you think that's on the security teams or the engineering teams?
On both. Yeah.
Engineering teams, it's hard. Having been a software engineer in the past, it's, selling security to engineers is a little bit like selling vegetables to kids. It's like, it's good for you, but it's a hard sell. I just know because like you're pressured to ship features, kind of that's what you're evaluated on, promoted on. And security is a little bit of an afterthought. And, I think it's not a coincidence that in the security space, there aren't that many examples of large application security companies.
Yep.
Because it's a tough sell. And so that'll be an interesting thing to see develop is maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Well, if I were, we're in the theoretical in all of this discussion.
Yeah.
I'll continue, which is, okay, well, if AI is the thing that helps attackers start attacking at scale at the application level, then that starts forcing the problems to be much, much bigger than what it is today, right? What's the attack the most today? It's infrastructure, right? Infrastructure is usually the thing that's attacked. There's more phishing, right? At the employee level. If applications start getting attacked because the logic start becoming easier and doing it at scale, then maybe the forcing function that says, hey, actually application security has to start growing, right?
Yeah.
Because we have to be preventative in this fashion.
Now that I think about it, probably like the most effective application security tools or products that have been built, we don't even think about as security, things like Rust, like eliminate entire classes of software vulnerabilities like memory, buffer overflows, things like that. And maybe we need more of that, like fundamental building blocks that developers don't even think about if they're building in a secure way, but they have no choice but to.
Actually, as a CISO, the best way to eradicate security vulnerabilities is good engineering hygiene. Right? If you have a really good pipeline, if you have really good processes, if all of these things are in place, that actually fixes a lot of it. Like Terraform alone, although, any experienced engineer might yell at me, Terraform has done great things because it's centralized configurations of cloud infrastructure, which means you can scan it easier, you can make sure that it's complying to the things that we want.
We should know what you
Standardization, create, which is really good. Versus applications, the layer above, there is no real standardization. Everything is a mess. Everything is complexity and integrated. And so that's really tough.
It sounds like we're on the same page. The flip side of cybersecurity is sort of security for these AI models, meaning I'm calling OpenAI, like, what am I feeding it? Am I sending confidential data or whatever? Or I'm building an LLM internally using our own data kind of within the four walls of our company. There is a lot of excitement around that. I still think it's quite early, I would say. I know there's a lot of companies addressing this issue, but to me, it feels like still quite early in that cycle where I think a lot of people are just still experimenting with this stuff, frankly, and I don't know where it all goes. And so, I do think there's going to be some disappointment in that space from all these companies getting funded.
Yeah, like I am 100% in line with you. In fact, like when I was thinking about this space is moving so fast. The way I kind of visualize it is it feels like shifting sand, right?
100%.
And how in the world are you at this spot where literally if I do not pay attention for a week in the news, things change completely, right? And what's going on. Like I just read 2 days ago about how now we have more efficient ways to do matrix multiplication, which now makes models on devices become super feasible, right? Like that just happened in like 2 days ago based on what I read. So it's like you can't keep up. And so then how are you what truth, solid foundation can you hold on to that says this is what we secure, right? What you build today can be completely different than what happens tomorrow.
I mean, this is why sort of when I take off my software engineer hat, put on my investor hat, you always hear in a gold rush sell picks and shovels, meaning infrastructure, like the thing people used to build the thing. But in this space, it's been hard to even understand what are the picks and shovels because the sands are shifting so fast. You don't know if you're digging for gold over here or drilling for oil over there. You know what I mean? Like, what is the equipment you need? And so, like, good example, like you blink, you miss it. Gemini dropped from Google. Very large context window. 1 million, they're talking about 10 million in the wings. Well, we've built all this infrastructure to compensate for small context windows, like all these RAG things. And what happens to all of them now? I don't know. Maybe they're still needed, but maybe not. Maybe they're not.
That's right.
And then OpenAI announced Sora, right? Like this new text-to-video model. And there are a lot of companies that have been funded to do just that. And what do they do now? I don't know. It's such an arms race. It reminds me a little bit of when I'm of an age where my first computer was the 286. It was a Gateway 2000 286. And
it was a 386.
Okay, so I'm older. I'm older. But remember how there was so much excitement around the next generation. Like the 286, the 386 is coming. Then the 486 is coming. The Pentium is coming.
And the 486, I think, had a turbo button.
They had all these flavors. And there was like, oh my God, I can't wait for this. And like the new possibilities this would unlock. And I think we're in that age where like GPT-4 was the standard for a while. Now Gemini has leapfrogged, then GPT-5 is coming. And what I'm more interested in, not so much is competing at that level. I'm interested in what can we build on top of these things.
Well, like to me, it's not can I secure the model, at least not right now. Because I just feel like it's moving too fast. But also, what do we think is capable that we could do with it, right? Like I feel like a lot of companies. What's really interesting is, as part of CSA, we get a lot of CISOs that are coming in and they're like, how do we secure AI? And then my first questions to them is, what are you building it for? And 95% of them are like, I don't know.
My board told me to go build something.
The engineering team is trying to figure this out. They're not quite sure what it's a chat bot or it's a replacement for sort of your enterprise search. Like these are the common scenarios, and they're not that interesting. They're not that interesting from a security perspective. They're not that interesting from an AI perspective, in my opinion. It really does when AI moves out of this, generation of images or search knowledge into these decision-making agents, execution side. That's when it gets
scary. That gets super scary.
And then security becomes interesting.
Oh, because then these things are actually taking action on somebody's behalf and
making decisions. These are doing things like an example I have is, okay, the sort of big thing that everyone is chasing is how do I create an executive assistant, right? Like that's how do I get an EA out of this? So think about an EA or think like, okay, when you give EA an access, you give access to your email and you give an EA access to your social media stream, right? Because, she's going to help you post and she's going to manage your calendar and your email. Okay, so then you give an AI the same level of access. How do you ensure that the AI doesn't post your email on your social media stream, right? Like it's knowledgeable and totally makes sense that an executive assistant isn't going to do that. Like it's almost kind of a given, like this is not going to happen. But how do you ensure that the AI, you have to give it access? How do you ensure that it's not going to make that mistake?
I don't know. I mean, it's like they call them hallucinations, but really like they're part and parcel of these things. So
that's where I do think security of AI becomes really fascinating.
Well, that moves us into what I would call high stakes use cases. Right now, we're in relatively low stakes use cases. Where it's like, okay, if a chatbot tells you the wrong thing, maybe it gets into like media, whatever, like you're Canada or whatever got in trouble
for $1.
It's like, okay, but who cares really in the grand scheme of things? And what else has been proven to be a really interesting use case? Copywriting. right? Okay, if you write something that's like not the best blog or whatever, who cares?
Can I also
Doesn't
say
matter.
it's way overblown, but
Yeah.
lots of spicy taste.
Code generation, but those are co-pilots. So you have the pilot, you have oversight, and
Augmented.
it's augmented. There's always somebody sitting alongside. But when you get into these autonomous use cases, that is where you almost can't ship it without the security aspect of it being nailed down.
Like when you start thinking about, okay, it's not even about being an EA anymore. Now what I do is I shift it to scale, and now what AI is monitoring is your production infrastructure. And it's looking at errors and issues that are popping up in your production infrastructure, analyzing, making decisions, and then taking actions against that. Oh, I see that this server is, having these errors. The best thing to do is reboot it, right? And it's going to go take action and then restart it, right? Now you're starting to get a super fascinating.
Yeah. That's an interesting use case because I've been on the other end of it. I carried the Gmail pager for a long time. And let me tell you, so like humans make mistakes all the time too, and reboot things that they shouldn't. So that's actually an interesting one where maybe the bar is a little bit, it's not like self-driving cars where you can kill somebody.
Yep.
There it's like, okay, maybe you started in your staging environment, see how it goes after a while. And so those are, I think what's going to happen is you'll have to find some of these lower stakes use cases and gradually ratchet it up before you go all the way to like Skynet or whatever.
Yes.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting because then the security is, if this thing is capable of taking action in production on my behalf, if I can prompt it to do something as an attacker, that gets really scary.
Yeah, and prompt injection has not been a solved thing yet. So it's become entirely different issue there. Which is interesting to see.
Yeah.
I have another really spicy discussions I'd love to hear your feedback. I have actually two of them. My first one is I feel we have way overdone on safety.
In AI or just in general?
In AI.
Okay, yeah.
Like in the way that...
But in what way? Like AI is going to kill us all, or AI, like locking down these LLMs and prompt injection?
No, not prompt injection, from a safety, from an ethics perspective.
I see.
For example, in ChatGPT, if you say, hey, I want you to generate an image of a bullet, it will refuse to do so.
I see. Sure.
Right? Because, that's against our... which, by the way, then leads to my second one, which is the more that these things get locked down and safe, and the more that you can't use it for the full power of what an LLM really could be, the more I think then it reverts that the people who create these LLMs have really powerful LLMs that no one else has access to except for them.
Oh, like internally,
right? Where they say, okay, for example, I know that I'm going to work with the government and or specified people that now have access to this very powerful LLM, because what the public is getting is this very safe, very neutered and smaller model, and that's what people are going to get. In the meantime, also these companies, the bigger you are, the more capable your model will be, and the more access that you have to that non-neutered model, which then also says to me that these companies, almost like bigger companies now, will have a bigger advantage than startups. That's never really happened, right? Where if you think AI and LLMs are going to be the future of how companies and software is created, the people who are going to hold all the cards are the big companies.
I think that's happened. I think that's happened before. Like, think about the PC wars. Like, Intel won. Who was number 2 to Intel? AMD distant. Who was number 3? I don't even remember.
Yeah.
I mean, like, because of the capital intensity of those businesses, the big just got bigger.
Right. And so do you think that we're going to start seeing that pattern happen?
It's happening right now. I mean, people like to crap on Google because they've been slow and all of that stuff. But, look, they just shipped Gemini. And if you look at Google, they have all the compute you need. They have all the talent still.
Yeah.
I would argue they have the most. And they have all the data.
Yeah.
I don't know how a startup competes with that.
Yeah. Then startups, or the people who are building startups, are going to be left with these neutered small models that they will only drop by the three: Google, Microsoft, OpenAI,
Anthropic or whatever.
Yeah, they'll all be like, they will only release enough to keep themselves in competition with each other, right?
Yeah, but I think that as long as there is some competition, I think the market forces will make it such that you'll get a kind of gravitational pull to have more capabilities. And then you have the wild cards like open source models, think Facebook, obviously.
Maybe.
Although now they took the investment from Microsoft, and I don't know what's going to happen with the open source stuff. But, Facebook is being very sort of active in the space and releasing a lot of stuff open source. And then maybe Elon, he's the wild card with, Grok or whatever he's got, the anti-woke LLM.
Of this,
it's a wild card.
Play.
I do think what's going to happen is the open source stuff will lag behind for probably at least a generation. But as these things progress, the open source stuff will progress as well. So maybe it's not like always cutting edge, but it will be good enough for lots of applications. And then the question is, okay, what is the set of applications where having like the most cutting edge thing is really enabling, and you can't do it with the last generation thing? Maybe there's stuff like that. And but I think it's, from my perspective, that's a safe bet to say the big are going to get bigger. I think this favors big players because of the scale you need.
Yeah, and the ability that you're actually now, I think, able to innovate a lot more than the odd to say, a startup. You're going to have way more capabilities.
I mean, there are more capabilities, but looking at Google, they keep tripping over themselves. I think startups have some advantages, but like in this specific layer of the stack, the foundation model layer, Google can screw up 5 times in a row. They just can, if they get it right once, if they release Gemini and it's great, they'll win. It's a little bit like Microsoft in the old days, like Windows wasn't good. 3.1 came out, and all of a sudden won the market. I think it's kind of like that, where they just have a number of, like, they can just go and try again. Maybe OpenAI and Microsoft, they're effectively an extension of Microsoft at this point, will be sort of like the other camp in this fight. But, it still, to me, is kind of like an open question, just how capable these models get. We've gone from like nobody knew about this stuff to like these things will kill us all in a year and a half or something. I do wonder if there's a little bit of extrapolation happening into the future that's not warranted, where just like with self-driving cars, there was a lot of excitement around, I don't know, it's like 15 years ago now when they first started coming out, that we're all going to be like, my kids won't need a driver's license anymore. And look at how long it's taken.
Yeah.
I feel like here, it's still more of an open question. Maybe the difference here is we know that by making these things bigger, they get better. And we know how to make them bigger.
And I also think there's this fundamental change that in my mind has happened, which is technology is democratized. Anyone can code. Anyone can create a company. Anyone can create value because you know how to code.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to go get a degree in order to go build something amazing. That's what caused, as a teenager, I can start build $1 billion business because of technology.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And if I...
Oh, you think that's going away?
Well, because then now, like, if LLMs and AI become as powerful, where they're the ones generating the code, they're the ones doing these things, and they're so powerful, you just can't, like, people themselves as human resources can't keep up with that. Then the thing about it is LLMs require 2 things. They require data and compute, and those are not democratized, right? And so now everything flows into these people who can hold that. Code is no longer democratized, where, okay, all of a sudden, like, the innovation starts dying. Because I think the reason why innovation exists is because code is democratized, right?
Yeah.
And so then to me, it says like, okay, these LLMs get so powerful, they're the ones creating the code at some point, and the people who own them, own them.
What I see is a little bit, the code is one thing, and it's true, it's been sort of a limiting factor for a lot of companies. You need like a technical co-founder to go like build the thing, and then you typically have the business co-founder to kind of like go and figure out kind of the market. The models may solve the coding part to some extent or make it easier. And so maybe the technical breakthrough is there, but I think the entrepreneurial breakthrough is still going to be needed. You know what I mean? Like adapting whatever the output of the technology is to the needs of the market and the end consumer. That's still kind of like that black magic of entrepreneurship, as you know, that if these models can do that, then like game over. I don't know. We're talking about like a different level of intelligence at that point. But that's like saying like aliens have landed on Earth. Like, what's my business model? That's like a separate business.
And by the way, we're way off cybersecurity.
Get us back on track. Where are we?
We're like going
next prompt.
And like the.
Yeah, but that's what I mean about it's an open question about how far this set of technologies takes us. Does scaling up transformers with more data, more compute, bigger network sizes get you there? I don't know. I think it's still an open question.
Or the compute part or data part starts becoming minimized, right? So similar to that thing I just read, which was, oh, hey, actually we can increase this by 3x now.
The efficiency.
Now models running on mobile devices.
Yeah.
Feasible, like these kinds of things will happen.
Yeah. If I were to bet, like if we're sitting here 10 years from now, I think we're looking back and we say we probably overestimated how quickly this stuff develops in the near term. Long term probably is very, very impactful, but it could be decades out.
Which, to your point, actually has happened in every single technology.
Yeah.
Same with cloud. Cloud still really actually took a decade.
And it's still, I mean, where do you think we are in the cloud migration? I would say top of the fourth maybe.
That's right.
Something like that.
That's right.
Not even halfway through.
Big cloud companies have actually just started now.
This stuff takes a while.
It
So
does take a while. Mobile, similarly, although it's kind of now it's settled.
It's like table stakes now.
But you're right. AI. I also am under a fundamental belief, like, there's that trough of, peak. I mean, trough, hype peak and trough of disillusionment. I also feel like, like the hype cycle, I do think there are many hype cycles for sure. And I definitely think that we are going to hit a trough of disillusionment here.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you start talking, like I was saying before, to all these people, and they're like, well, why are you implementing AI? And they basically have no real answers.
Because my board is asking.
Yeah, my board is. That means that they have they have some expectation, but they don't know what it is. And if that's true, then it will always fail your expectation.
Yeah, it's like it's like the blockchain people are now the AI people.
Yeah, that's true. I will say blockchain, I think it's definitely not as applicable as AI. But
like all these enterprises have their blockchain teams, man. I don't know what the hell they were doing, but yeah.
I will take this into security. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I have a pivot.
Let's pivot.
This is where I do think now blockchain will have a real chance. And here's where I'm saying this. Okay, you ready?
I need a beer.
I'm going to pitch you for funding. Okay, here's my pitch. All right. So my belief is that because of Gen AI, we're obviously seeing so much crap being generated, right? Everything like Sora, like you can't even believe what you're seeing. It's so real. Everything is going to be generated. So that means you must assume everything being generated is fake, right? By default, everything is fake. What you see on TV, even hangout calls, content, everything is now fake. So then that is not possible to stand for long, right? Because now when I go to court cases or I'm going, you actually do things like you have videos or photos, like this stuff all has to be proven to be true. There has to be authenticity to this. Well, how do you get authenticity? You have to have identity that's tied to this. You have to have a true sort of chain of custody around these types of things. So my theory is that Gen AI, because of all the crap that it generates, is a forcing function that's going to force us to create real identity.
Okay.
Which today, by the way, we don't have real identity. We duct tape everything on top of each other, like MFA. MFA is a duct tape for proving it's you, proving that.
Because I have this thing,
That's right, because I have this thing. And so because we're entering into that world, you're going to start seeing like, well, how do we differentiate between what is computer generated versus what is a real person, right? Actually, WorldCoin and sort of the whole tools for humanity for doing that orb, right? Which is, it's all about, proof of person. Which is, can I prove you're not a bot? The only way to do that is some unique, true thing of identity, right? I do believe that that's going to force us to start rethinking when I'm born as a child is the only thing that's my identity is a birth certificate, because that's absolute crap, right? Like, and we are duct taping off of, very, very crappy foundations, which is, oh, you get a birth certificate, which by the way is only a label, not really identity, right? But that's what we're treating, a social security number and a birth certificate. And therefore, in this new world where everything is fake, I must tie it back to a core root of truth. So I must say, okay, Caleb, you are Caleb. I'm going to have something that says you are truly unique, you are truly a person. And then I have to have custody, chain of custody, that proof of person is tied very strongly to my label, which is in the US, some driver's license or some social security number that says this is strongly tied. That chain of custody to each of these things. And then when I take a photo or I write something, that chain of custody has to continue down that line, right? So that means, well, what's going to do that? Blockchain.
And so I've heard a version of this pitch before. What's never been clear to me is how you go from the blockchain to the real world. Like, what is that? The Oracle problem, right? Like, I have something on the blockchain that says I'm Caleb, and then how do I present that in the real world in a way that really proves that that's me? That's never been clear.
Sure. Like, and as an example, I don't know the exact answer to this, but like if I sign something, right?
Yeah.
That is somewhat provable that I've signed it as long as it's tied to something very strong in my signing, right? So if I sign it, then you can prove it. You can say, clearly, Caleb signed this. I can match it.
But isn't in the final analysis in our current system, that thing that verifies I signed it or not is basically penalty of me going to jail if I commit fraud. If I sign it for someone else and I sign something as Caleb Sima and I'm not you, if I get caught, I can go to jail.
But that's because there's no strong chain of custody down to the original, right? Because what you're basically saying is, well, Ilya can go and sign it because there's no strong root of trust at the beginning of court.
And so in your world, what would be that root of
so
trust?
Like if I were born in the hospital and then I get my signing and the government or whoever that happens to be, whatever that, there is a signing of my start of my chain of custody.
Okay.
Boom, Caleb is
born. So like a chip in the back of your head?
Chip in the back of your head.
Okay.
Boom, Caleb is born. Chip in the back of the head signs that root of trust. Now that custody chain has started, and therefore everything now that you do is tied. So if you try to come in, clearly that chain of trust cannot happen.
Brain chips. All right, let me get my term sheet out. You got it.
See, I told you I could link blockchain to AI to security.
Don't get me started on blockchain.
So now that we've gone way off the deep end through all this conversation.
You, not we, you.
No, you totally were part of it, but I was having fun with it. I guess we draw it back. What's practical? Maybe, today or maybe even a year from now, I would say is probably practical for this.
Yeah.
Which is, okay, what's your suggestions for what do we do to help protect and secure ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, it depends what you're doing with AI. Certainly, if you're kind of thinking about sending potentially sensitive company data to a third party, whether it's your employees using ChatGPT or whatever. I mean, there are plenty of solutions that'll help you do that, including maybe like even potentially open source solutions. There's lots out there you can discover. If you're building these systems, I almost would say, this might sound bad, but I wouldn't worry about it. Like all this data poisoning stuff, that sounds fairly far-fetched to me today. We're so far kind of away from all this stuff that I would just say, go experiment with it. Don't worry about it. When you're ready to go into production in a year or whatever, things may have shifted so much that whatever like security protocols that you had today may no longer be applicable. So I would just like give people free. Maybe I'm in this camp of like let it rip.
Unless you're a foundational model, then you need to.
Sure, but nobody's building like I don't know if anybody in our audience is building a foundational model. Like, are you OpenAI or are you Google? And so, that would be my answer. And the next thing I would say is watch this space because things are moving super fast. And once we get to some of these higher stakes use cases, that's when the real game starts.
When I think about this, in two buckets. I think there's how do I protect or secure, let's say, my enterprise in deploying an AI model. And then there's also just how do I protect myself from the attackers using AI as augmentation, right? And so the first, I think we covered a lot, which is, there's a lot of information about, to your point, like, do you really need to worry about data poisoning? Or are you really it's more of a third-party risk problem for you as an enterprise? Do I trust OpenAI? Do I trust Anthropic? That's probably the question you need to ask. I don't know if you're really building models internally or you have to worry too much about that and the securing of the model itself. I do think, by and large, you will need a way to test for or at least some way to protect against prompt injection. I think that is a basic for any enterprise deploying some sort of model. There's lots that we can go into there, but I think that's enough. I think what's more probably relevant for most CISOs and practitioners is what am I going to do about these AI augmented attacks? Specifically, like when we start thinking about deep fakes, we start thinking about spear phishing, we start thinking about this stuff really happening at pretty large scale, like right now today. And I think there are a couple things that you got to worry about. Is obviously first, you must educate I think, your company on how real this stuff is, right? Like, you have to stand up in front of your, like, get in front of your, at your company-wide conference, ask for 10 minutes and show demos of how real deepfakes look and how it can be me video conferencing you and talking to you and asking you to reset your password. Like, people have to learn how real this stuff is and what this spear phishing is capable of. I think education is number one. But more than education, there are things that you can do. For example, a lot of these things should have processes played. Like, hey, when I wire money out, there should be more than one person that has to approve these things and validate it. Like, okay, we should definitely talk over multiple bands of channels in order to confirm not just me calling you, not just me hanging on a video call. There needs to be second out of band channels that we confirm these are wired funds that should be done. The second thing that I would encourage you to do, we actually did this inside my last company, where we tied our SSO login to our YubiKey, our hardware. And we had a thing in Slack where you just say verify. And so internally of an employee, if an employee is asking you to do something, you can say verify me. It'll prompt up your SSO. They'll touch their YubiKey, cool. And it will say, great, you're verified. Now I know I'm talking to a person, and it is someone who is an employee who at least goes through SSO in your enterprise. Mm-hmm. This is a great solution for ensuring deep fakes or you're talking to the right person. Mm-hmm. There's also one third ghetto tip. This is the wave your hand in front of your face. Have you heard this one?
No.
Which is, okay, if you're on a video conference person and something looks off about what they're doing, just ask them to wave their hand in front of it. Most of these models are pretty cheap and it'll break when you wave your hand, and the model of the fake face will get all screwy when they're doing it.
That's funny.
So those are your practical examples.
You heard it here first, folks. We're out.
Yeah.